Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So our topic for today, of course, is about data communication network design in enterprise architecture. No, so the network managers no perform two key tasks. No, designing new networks and network upgrades, and the day-to-day operation of existing networks. And these topics examine network design, wherein the network design is an interactive processes no in which the designer examine users needs, developers an initial set of technology design, assessment their costs now, and revisit the needs analysis until the final network design emerges. No, so we need to consider that all but the smallest organization have networks, no? Which means that most network design projects are the design of upgrades or extensions to existing networks rather than the construction of entirely new networks. Even the network of an entirely new building is likely to be integrated with the organization's existing backbone or the wide area networking. So even new projects can be seen as extension of the existing networks. Nonetheless, network design is very challenging. Okay, so to give us more details about the topic, let us all welcome Miss Beverly. Go ahead, Miss Beverly.
Thank you, sir. So, am I audible?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I think ayan. So, hello everyone. Good afternoon. So, as mentioned earlier, today I'll be discussing data communications network design. So, oh, wait. Wait lang, sir. I'm okay. So, today I'll be covering the following. First off, like an introduction, just a few review of the networking concepts. Um, Next is the actual process of how we design our network, which includes needs analysis. Paano ko makakolapse to? Okay. Which includes needs analysis, technology design, cost assessment. That's the three main steps on how we can design our network. I will also this briefly discuss implications for cybersecurity and of course summarize everything. So first off, the first part of my presentation would be the introduction. So at this point, we'll be discussing the network architecture components, which I know you'll be familiar with. This will certainly be like an easy concept to grasp. Next off, we have the traditional network design process, and lastly, the building block network design approach. Okay. So first off, here is an example of a network design. So, okay. This is an example of network architecture components. Okay. So, to discuss each component of the network architecture, we have, okay. So, we have 7 components. So, as network managers, so that is what we call um, network designers. They are also called network managers. So they look at network design in 7 distinct components. So we have the local area network, we have the building backbone network, we have campus backbone, data center, wide area network, internet access, and e-commerce edge. So let's break all of that, break down each component. First, we have the local area network. This is probably the most familiar type of network for all of us because we've probably used this in at home, in school, or even at work. So the other term for local area network is access network. So why do we call it access network? It's because it's where the users can access the first layer, or the layer that can be accessed by the actual users. So it means us as employees, or our and even our employers. So local area network. And local area network could be either wired or wireless. So it depends upon the what they call this infrastructure of the company or the setting of the organization. So nowadays it's more of the actually it's both eh. Companies both use wired and wireless. So depending on the need of or needs of the organization. Okay. So next up is what we call the building backbone network. It other term for that is distribution layer. So after the access layer, so that's where the traffic will come from, and the traffic or the traffic will go to. So first, the second layer would be what we call the distribution layer. So this is where from the local area network, which other components of the network will the traffic be going. So in the backbone or the building backbone network, as the word implies, distribution. So it distributes the traffic to other components of the network. So next up is the campus backbone or core layer. Core layer. So as you can see, let's go back to the previous slide. So as you can see in the diagram here, this company has three main campuses, meaning campuses, for example, we have, wait lang, let me think of for example, a school. For example, De La Salle University. So De La Salle has different branches here in the Philippines. So each campus has several buildings. So just like here in the diagram, the company has three main campuses. Each campus is composed of different buildings. So you can probably imagine how visually the network goes. So in the diagram, you can also see the different components: local area network, wide area network, the backbone, and all of the other components. So yeah, that's how campus network, not campus component works. It connects the different buildings in that particular area. Next up is the data center. This is considered the heart of the network. This is where as it implies, all the data, the email server, the databases, and other types of servers within the organization is located. So usually data centers can be found at the center of the campus or the center of the organization or even center of the building. So literally at the center. So data center is actually um, structured just like your LAN, but the only difference is that in LAN, the users can access that. But in data center, this is well protected because this is where all the data are stored. And most companies or organizations really invest in securing their data. So all data here are what they call this encrypted. So just in case someone is trying to hack or to break in through the data center, it will be at least protected. So the hacker has to decode first the encryption before he'll found the what do you call this data useful for him. So that's data center. Actually, for this four components like the building backbone, it's always based on the basic. It's just the capability of the hardware is faster. For example, in the backbone, it's another layer of just like an upgraded component of the local area network. It's just the switches, the routers, and other hardware components have higher capabilities. Okay. After data center, actually, the last three components is what we call the enterprise edge. So the first four components is like the internal network components of the company, and the last three is the components that connects the company to the outside world. So first up, we'll have the wide area network. So um, wide area network is a private, this is for private use of the company. So wide area network connects campuses. So for example, if like my previous example from De La Salle University, if they have like a wide area network, so all campuses have are connected somehow through this component. So that's wide area network. Lastly is no, second to the last is internet access. So as the word implies, this is how companies connect to the internet. This is where our telecoms comes to play. So yeah, that's internet access. And lastly is the e-commerce edge. So this is the component that connects the business to its customers. So e-commerce is where, for example, the email server. So for example, a customer, um what they call this, suddenly has a complaint to that specific company, and he or she sends an email. So the component that handles that is what we call the e-commerce edge. Okay. Okay, so next up is for us to compare how the traditional network design, to discuss, to briefly discuss the traditional network design versus the new approach that I will be covering today. So first off, let's have the traditional network design. So how do we design, or how do network managers design a network for a specific client, or for a specific company? So first off, if you're, of course, you can still remember our process in SDLC, right? Yung systems, ano natin, or application development. So first off, we identify user needs. So this is where we talk to our clients, or our stakeholders. What do you need? What do you want us to do? Next is to the the system analyst or the network analyst will develop a precise estimate of the amount of data. So key to network design, um, the network manager or the network analyst actually has to know um, how much traffic would come and go to in the different components of the network architecture. So once that is identified, next up is designing the circuits needed to support traffic. So now that we know the numbers, how much traffic we'll have to handle, next is to actually build the physical part of the network, which are the circuits. And next up is estimates cost. So of course, when we want to implement something in the company, every move we make is equivalent to some kind of monetary equivalent. So this is where we estimate the cost of the hardware, software, and the people that will be working on the implementation of the network. And next up is actually building the network, and lastly is implementation. So this is where the implementation goes, that like the training of the staff, how will they use the network? Because why do we need to create a network design in the first place? It's because, data is very important to every company. So it has to have a structure or an infrastructure that can support the kind of data that each company is working on. So now that we know the traditional network design process, let's go to by the way, before we go to that new approach, there are still this traditional network design still works today. In some companies they still use this kind of process, but there are things that contributes to why other network analysts or network managers use this new approach to network design. So first off is the technology, that traditional network design can barely keep up to the ever fast changing technology. So like the capabilities of our circuits, of our hardware devices, um, the need for a more skilled workers to actually develop the system, and of course the implementation. It's more of the fast paced approach. And next one is the growth in network traffic. So before, I remember earlier, di ba, we had a report in one of our subjects that talks about big data. So before the like 20 or 30 years ago, oh no, 20 years ago, the amount of traffic that has been receiving by the users or by our telecoms is like at least 5 times the amount of data that they're handling right now. So it's the growth is very exponential. And lastly is the balance of cost. So actually based on a certain study, I forgot the research, but it's actually more expensive to pay people than to the actual equipments. Because as I mentioned, networking is a very specialized field in IT, and not a lot of people are actually, you know, interested in learning about the subject or actually exploring the field. But it is one of the, paid highest paid positions in the IT industry when your work is related to networks. But yeah, the balance between the cost and the long-term effect of or the long-term benefits of the network. So it's actually something that um, the senior management and the implementing team has often been the cause of conflict. So that will also be discussed later on. Okay, so yeah, wait, okay. So this is the approach that I've been talking about, the building block network design approach. So instead of how many processes did we have with the traditional? I think 5 or 6 stages. The building block network design approach simplifies this process into 3 main processes. We have the needs analysis, we have the technology design, and we have the cost assessment. Okay. So first off, we have the needs analysis. Okay. With the needs analysis, it's divided into 4 main categories or forming tasks. First is the network architecture component, which is we've already discussed before. The application system, the network users, and categorizing network needs. And of course, we'll also will tackle the deliverables for this process. Okay, so how does that work? How does needs analysis work? So this is basically the 4-step process for this stage. First off is to break the network into the 7 network architecture components. So we already discussed that before. Next is to review list of applications. Next is to assess the number and types of users. And last is to assess the relative amount of traffic. So let's discuss each of that. Okay. So first up is the network. Yeah, I've already discussed this. So yeah, you have to break down all the 7 or the design into this 7 distinct components. So this will be easier. And if you're collaborating with other people to build the network, this would also help you in navigating the design more easily. Yeah. And then next up is we have the application systems. Of course, since we're working on data, so data has to have like an application that will handle all of these data depending on its function. So in listing the application, since we're dealing with needs analysis, what application should we include in the network design? So it has to be well documented at this point. That will affect the circulation of the data or the structure of the network. So I have here several factors. It's a bit a lot that we have to consider when listing down the application that we need. First off is long and short range. This concerns with the business goals. So we have to consider that. Of course, in strategic plan, what is the bigger picture? So development plans for new products or services. So if the company has future plans of developing new products and services, so applications would probably be needed at that point. So the network manager also has to anticipate that or consider that. We have the projection of sales, that's self-explanatory. Research and development projects, we also have to consider major capital expenditures. Of course, cost is a big consideration here. We also have possible changes in product mix. What else? New offices that, oh, putal siya. Okay, new offices lang to. New offices that is required to actually build the network. So it will also include the or will increase the cost. So it also has to be documented. The security issues that also includes how we are going to solve those issues. We also have future commitments to technology. So as I've mentioned, technology is fast or rapidly changing. So we have to consider the future development of the technology. Okay. Next up is the network users. So first, we were able to break down the design into 7 distinct components. Second is we identified all of the applications that will be used. And next is one of the most important thing in the network component, which are the users. So in the users, of course, first off, we have to determine how many users would be catered by the network. And next, what types of users? So, meron ba tayong, we have the admins, we have the staff, what are their access capabilities for each one. And the third point here, wired or wireless. So this will depend, as I mentioned also earlier, upon the needs of the organization or the infrastructure that will be built during the network design. Okay. And next is categorizing the network needs. So this pertains to the specification of the network design. So basically, we'll categorize the network needs into 3 main categories. First off is the mandatory requirement. This means that this is the non-negotiable. So this list has to be included in the network design no matter what. So next is the desirable requirement. This is like the want or the wants of the users. So this could be negotiable, but still it would be preferable if these requirements could be met. But as I mentioned, it could also be negotiable. The wish list requirement, this is a requirement that basically doesn't what they call this cover the scope. So of course, when we design a certain product, especially this network design, we have to declare the scope. So if the scope doesn't cover some features, that would be included in the wish list requirement. So it could be a the next version of the network design in the future. So yeah. Um, Next up, what are the deliverables of this stage? So first off, we have to have a logical network diagrams. So on the left side of the screen, you can see an example of a sample um, sample needs component. So this diagram is one of the outputs or deliverables of the needs analysis. We also have to, yeah, okay. So logical network diagram, it's a conceptual plan for the network and does not include or does not consider the specific physical elements that will be used to implement the network. So this is just in other words, this is just purely theoretical. So at least we know what our users need, what the network needs, and the needs of our other stakeholders. Okay, so now that we know the needs of each stakeholders, we have to actually create the technology design. So in the technology design, we'll break that down into 4 distinct parts. First is designing clients and servers. Second is designing circuits. Second, designing circuits. Third, network design tools. Yeah, third, alam hanggang three lang pala siya. But we'll also discuss the deliverables. So first off, we have the designing clients and servers. Here we have to consider what kind of users do we have and what specifications are most appropriate to those kind of users. So this information or these information are already provided during the needs analysis. So for example, the typical user has to have a specific type of computer. But basically, what happens in real world situation is that since technology is rapidly changing, the network design has to be like at least one step ahead of the technological update so that um, the iteration of the process would be longer and of course to lessen the cost in the long run. And most of the time, advanced users are the one who's a bit having a hard time managing the or navigating the network design, not because they're not capable, but because of the hardware requirement that they need, which are usually not met during the initial process of the network design. Okay. Next up is designing the circuit. So this is more of the technical, super technical stuff of the network design, which is basically, to put it simply, is the capacity um, planning. So what kind of cables, what kind of routers, what kind of switches do we need in this network design for it to support the data that the organization is handling. So that's basically the gist of this process. Okay. And next up, network design tools. So just like in any other design process, we have tools that can help us. Both. I mean, most of them are propriety, has proprietary claims. So it's actually part of the cost assessment later on, the software that we'll be using in assisting us in network design. So in network design tools, we can either create a design or diagrams from scratch or from an existing network. So as also mentioned earlier by Sir Marmelo, most of the network design are just like an upgrade of the existing design. So every organization, whether it's small or large, it already has some kind of existing network. So this is rarely been done, the designing from scratch. But what's good about designing tools, based on what I've read, I haven't used any of these tools before or any networking tools for per se, but based on what I've read, one of the key features of a network design tool is its simulation capability. So, for example, during the simulation capability, the software or the tool can actually simulate how the data will pass through all the components of the network. So in that way, um, some problems or some issues can be resolved early on. Okay. Next, what are the deliverables of this process? Of course, it's only one, the physical network design. So of course, this is the actual network. Includes the cables, the switches and the routers, and other hardware components of the network. So that's that deliverable. Okay. So the last process is the cost assessment. This is the most crucial part, of course, aside from the tedious technological design. But the cost is actually one of the crucial parts of it because you cannot actually start building the network design if you don't have a budget for it. So we have three bullets here. We have the request for proposal, or three processes. Of course, submitting the request for proposal or RFP. We also have selling the proposal to managers or to the management, and of course, our deliverables. So first off, um, what are the costs to consider in making your cost assessment? So first off, of course, we have the circuit cost, the hardware, the network devices. We have the hardware cost, but the software, of course, that pertains to the tools, assisting tools, network management costs, that includes the project lead, um, okay, test and maintenance cost, and cost for wide area network and internet circuits. So those are the things that a network manager has to consider in allocating the funds or in proposing the cost assessment. So here is request for proposal. So in request proposal, we'll be seeing this information. So first off, we'll see the background information. So this includes the organizational profile, the overview of the current network, if that network is or already exists, the review of the new network, and the goals of the new network. So it has to be well documented at that point. We also have the network requirements. So I've already mentioned this before. The network requirements, choice sets of possible network design, like the hardware, software, and circuits. We also have the mandatory, desirable and wish list items, security and control, and so on. So basically all the things that our network requires. Also included in the request are service requirements and bidding process requirements. So bidding process, especially when you're working with the government, this is such a crucial information to have in your request for proposal. So it has to be time bound, of course. Yeah, the rules or the expectations for this what do you call this, for this network design. Yeah, bid evaluation. So will be most probably will be sourcing the devices from different vendors, or even for one vendor. But in government, it's always about bidding. So because most of the time budget is really constricted, or there's always a budget constraint. So yeah, and the last part would be the information required from um, the vendor. So if you've already selected where you'll buy all the equipments, or well you'll outsource um, your workforce that will be working on the network design, so it also has to be included in the request. Okay. So next up is selling, to actually sell your proposal to the management. So most of the time, as I mentioned earlier, this is often the point of conflict when it comes to the IT department and especially the senior management. Because most of the time, the management doesn't see the benefit of implementing these kinds of things. So some tips on how to actually sell your request or proposal is to talk in a management language. So when we say management language, you always have to put it in a way that will benefit the business. So for example, if we implement this network design, in the long term, um, the company's cost in operations will be lessened, or um, employees would be more efficient with their work, thus improving the quality of work, and also improving the customer service. So you always have to look at the benefits. So what's in it for the company, or what's in it for the management? So that's management language. And of course, you have to emphasize growth. Like what I mentioned, what would be the benefit of implementing those network design? And lastly, show graphs and charts. So most of the time, management, especially senior management, has to see the bigger picture of things. So how do we, instead of just, presenting like a deck um, of all the reports or the statistics, show them the possible growth of the company through charts and graphs. So in that way, that your information would be more meaningful to the senior management. Okay. Okay. And next up, what are the deliverables of this process? Of course, ito nga yun, yung request for proposal or RFP. We also have the revised physical network diagrams, because when you finally have the budget for it, so you might be constrained or limited by the amount of budget that was approved to your team. So you have to have a bit of a revision with your design, and of course the business case. So also one of the crucial parts of this this stage. So this cost analysis or cost assessment, you have to clearly present the benefits of this network design to the business. So those are the um, three main processes of the building block network design approach. So it simplifies everything. The needs analysis, where we focus on the users and the um, requirements of the users for the network design. We have the technology design, which we actually start building or start the blueprint of the network design, and of course the cost analysis, where we present all of the things that we want to be implemented in the network design to the management, because at the end of the day, they're the decision makers. So we have to be mindful of that. Okay, so when we say network, oh, security, you're probably wondering why I put the a picture of a dog there. So just remind me of security, guard dog and stuff. But anyway, when we say network, it's always being associated to security. So actually, I believe this will be discussed also later on or by other reporters. But just to give you just a gist, so actually, I remember back when I was in undergrad, one of the things that um uh, most of the students with my batch, they're avoiding the type of system that are has a complicated network design, because it the more um or the wider the network, so the more vulnerable it is, and the more that you have to implement security um protocols or to protect those components of your network. So first off, in this approach, most of the time, the network manager approach this in a way of also breaking it down into those 7 distinct components. So the local area network has its own security protocols. The one or the wide area network has its own, especially the data center. The data center is probably the most secured. We'll hope that's the case for all types of organizations, because after all, that's where all of their data are stored. So yeah, in approaching this issue of security, it's always good to break it down into the different network architecture components to make it clear. So network managers actually has different pages or different diagrams for each component, so that they can easily lay out the protection that can be implemented in each component. So yeah. Okay, so that is it for my presentation. So today I'll just before I end, let me just summarize what I've discussed so far. We have discussed the network architecture components. Those are 7 components. The traditional network design, which is modeled after our traditional software, no, application development life cycle, and of course the new approach to network design, which is the building block approach. which simplifies the 5 or 6 components of the traditional into 3, which are the needs analysis, the technology design, and the cost assessment. So yeah, that's my last slide. So the reference, here's the reference that I've used. So that would be all for my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for an excellent presentation. I appreciate it much. Okay, so in this topic, we learned about the overall process of designing and implementing a network. We are now familiar with techniques of developing a logical network design and the physical network design at the same time. And we'll be able also to familiar with the network design principles, rules and function of network management software, and several network management tools. So as I mentioned earlier, now our presenter will be able to deliver an excellent presentations regarding the topic. So thank you very much, Miss Bravo. No, okay.